Alright, so welcome back to our fourth tutorial. Now we are going to be creating a Space Invaders like game here. And we've been creating different games, and the idea here is that we want to really start to add some different pieces that you could take to make different types of games. One game that we haven't really looked at now is a scrolling shooting type of game. So we're going to look at a couple different things with this game. And the first is, kind of adding some player movement, spawning enemies, shooting, but also building that scrolling background and things like that. We're going to tackle this in several steps. The first step that we're going to look at in this video is adding sprites and backgrounds and making that background scroll. We're also going to put some planets on there, and that'll help us to kind of give us a little bit more of an effect. Okay, so over in Game Maker, we're going to add some sprites. Okay, so I'm going to go look to load sprites and back out of my image there. If I go into Game Maker 8 and into my sprites, there is a space section, so I'm going to use a lot of these guys here. Okay, so we need to have different images for ourselves. We can use whatever we want. I'm going to use, I think, the triangle for my picture. And I'm going to also click on Remove Background for this guy. Open him up, and I'll call him Main Sprite. Okay, and I'm going to also add a couple planets. So if I come back in here, I have Planet 1, Planet 1 sprite, and let's add a Planet 2 as well. Okay, and you can add a third planet if you want to. I'm just going to stop at 2 for the purposes of this tutorial. But again, you can add that third one if you want to. Okay, so now that we have our sprites, we're going to go out and create our background. So this time, instead of actually loading a background, we're going to just edit the background and make our own. So if I click Edit, you notice I have a pretty small background. So I'm going to go back and resize my background to say 640 by 640. I don't need to keep the aspect ratio, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and then I'm going to flood fill this background with a black. So click the back and do that. Now I want to take and add some stars to my background. So I'm just going to take the small pen, put some small dots out there. Don't see too much. You don't need a lot here. I'm going to add a couple small, slightly larger dots. I'm going to give myself a couple off-color dots. Maybe some pale blue stars. And a couple of smaller ones like that. And just a few things to give us a background. Okay, just like that. Okay. Then I can say okay to that. Okay, so now that I have my background, I can put it into a room. So let's create our room. And for now, we're just going to put our background in. And so we load our background there. And now notice down here we have a vertical speed. So we're going to say vertical speed of 2. You can adjust it faster or slower, but you don't want it to be too fast. Otherwise, it just won't look realistic. So then if I run it now, you'll notice that we get our background scrolling continuously with our stars kind of flying by there. Okay, so now going back here, we've created our sprites, we've added the rolling background. Now we want to add our random planets to the picture. Okay, so let's go create our first object. We'll have Planet 1, so Planet 1 object. Okay, and our sprite is going to be our Planet 1 sprite. Now we have to have 2 events here. The first event is our create event, and this is where we're going to create it and set the speed down. So we're going to say set vertical speed again to 2. And then we happen to have another event, which is going to be a step event. And this is where we're going to check to see if we are off the screen, and if we are, we're going to put the planet back at the top and move it down. So we're going to do that with an if event. So I'm going to check a variable. So test variable. And the variable is going to be our y. So think about our screen. We have an xy coordinate system. We're going to check our y, which is our vertical element. And I want to check to see if it is larger than our room height. So think about, again, our x is going to measure our room width. Here we're going to look at our room height. If that y value is greater than our room height, we need to move our planet. And so that's where we're going to say move jump to position. Okay. We need to know, first of all, we need to understand, hold on a second, we need to understand how big our planet is. So our planet is 32 by 32. So remember, this is really telling us that top left corner. So when we jump to our position, our y position has to be greater than 32 so that it doesn't jump back onto the screen. So we can do something like negative 33, and that'll actually put our planet just off the screen, and then it'll scroll on in a little bit. Now for x, we're actually going to use a random function. So we're going to say random, and we want to generate a number between 0 and our room width. Okay, so essentially we've said, okay, once we create it, start scrolling it down. If it gets to the edge of the room, jump it back up, and the scrolling will still be applying, so we don't necessarily need to change anything there. So let's go test this out. Let's go put our planet on our screen, and we'll save that and run it. And there we go. There's our planet scrolling along with it. Now let's see what happens when we get to the edge of the screen. You see it comes up and it picks a new spot. Every time it gets off the screen, it should pick a new random location to move to, and then just keep going from there. And that's just about the same spot, but it did move over a little bit. All right, so that looks good. What we need to do is to add our other one now, but what we can do is just duplicate our object. We'll call this Planet 2, and we'll change our Planet 2 object. And we'll change our sprite to Planet 2. And then we'll go back into our room and we'll add our second planet right there. Now we want to space them out for the start, but once we start, they're going to go to random locations anyway. So again, if you have 3 or 4 planets, you can add more planets. You can make some of the planets bigger or smaller. You could even speed some of them up so that some of them go by quicker or not quite as fast as well. But you notice the planets are really moving along in the background. Now one thing that we're going to want to do as well that we forgot to do when we created the object is set the depth of our object. So we want to make sure that these objects are in our background. So let's set a depth of 1000 for these. So that's going to essentially make sure that they don't collide with any objects as we go. We don't want to collide with, we want these planets to be kind of in the background. Okay, so that's all we had for this video. Starting in the next video, we're going to look at adding our main character and the movements that go along with that.